Okay, our objectives today deal with absolute value equations. We're going to be solving those today, and our first objective says I can solve equations in one variable that contain absolute value expressions. Absolute value. The absolute value of x is the distance from 0 to x on a number line. I need you to write that down. Write down these words. Absolute value. The absolute value of x is the distance from 0 to x on a number line. Let's look at what that means. On a number line, you have -5 and you have 5. -5 is just as far away from 0 as +5 is away from 0. The key here is that distance can never be negative. So if, for example, you were to drive to Cookeville, and then you were to drive back to Sparta, you didn't drive 0 miles. You drove 30 miles. You drove 15 miles there, and you drove 15 miles back. Even if you were to drive back all the way in reverse, it still wouldn't equal 0 miles. So distance, anytime you go a distance, you've always gone a positive distance. Distance is always positive. It cannot be negative. Another example, 3, the absolute value of -3 equals +3. And that means that x is 3 units. That means, that x is 3 units from 0. So -3 is 3 units from 0, and +3 is 3 units from 0. Again, distance can never be negative.
We've got absolute value of x equals 12. It says, what value of x would make this a true statement? It says, don't forget on the number line, absolute value is the distance between 0 and the number. Is there more than one value of x that would make this a true statement? Think, what numbers are 12 units from 0? If we look at the number line, and I look at 0, then +12 is 12 units away from 0, but also the -12 is 12 units away from 0. So +12 and -12 could be our x here. It's 12 units. So x can be either -12 or x can be a +12. And if we check this, we'll see that both of these are true. The absolute value of -12 equals 12, and the absolute value of +12 equals 12. Because absolute value turns everything positive. So it's going to turn this -12 into a +12, and the +12 is going to stay a +12. So this one has two different answers.
And as it says in the bottom, you do not have to copy this example.
Here's our first one. It says the absolute value of x equals 4.
You do have to copy this.
It says write two equations from what numbers are 4 units from 0. So I'm going to write this as the absolute value of -4 or the absolute value of +4. So I'm going to split this up. I'm going to say x equals -4 and x equals +4. We're going to write a solution set to list the numbers least to greatest. Solution set says that we need these braces. Okay, I like to call them squigglies because it's much more fun to say. So you're going to put your -4 and your +4 in the squigglies from least to greatest. So the -4 is going to come first and then the +4. So our answers to the absolute value of x equals 4 is -4 and +4. If we check this again, the absolute value of -4, absolute value turns everything positive, so it's a +4. 4 equals 4. If I put in the absolute value of 4, it remains a +4, so 4 equals 4 also checks out. Yeah, make sure you have the work, the squigglies or braces for your set notation, and also your check.
All right, number 2 we're going to look at on paper. Okay, so we have our absolute value bars over here on this side of the problem. We have the absolute value of x plus 3 equals 7. So now we have to set this up as two separate equations. and we're going to bring this down. And I want you to always draw your arrows when you're setting up these two separate equations because it kind of cues you to knowing that that's exactly what you're doing. There are a couple of steps here. We're going to drop the absolute value bars as we bring this down, and we're going to say x plus 3 equals negative 7. And then we're going to say x plus 3 equals positive 7. So these are my two separate equations. I'm going to draw a line down here just so I don't get confused, and I know that I'm working two separate equations. And now we just solve for x. So on this side, I have a positive 3. I'm going to subtract 3. This cancels. Excuse me there. This cancels and leaves me with x equals negative 7 minus 3 is going to give me negative 10. And then on this side of the problem, I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides. This is going to cancel, and I'm going to be left with x equals 4. So that's the math. Now again, I have to write my solutions in these braces or squigglies. So I have negative 10, comma, 4. Now again, these braces are not the easiest thing in the world to draw, and we know that. We know if you've tried to draw them, just attempt and do the best you can. They will get better over time. But we understand it's not something that you're used to drawing, so that's okay. Now, we need to check our work to make sure that we're correct. So we're going to come over here and write our check. Now, in the check, you go back to the original problem with your absolute value bars, and we're going to plug in, I don't think I left enough room there, to both of these problems. We have our original problem, x plus 3 equals 7. Absolute value of x plus 3 equals 7. So I'm going to plug in my negative 10 plus 3 equals 7. And then I'm also going to check my other problem with my other answer, which was the absolute value of 4 plus 3 equals 7. So negative 10 plus 3 equals negative 7. And the absolute value of negative 7 is 7. 4 plus 3 equals 7. The absolute value of 7 equals 7. So this checks and this checks. These are my x's. Make sure that you have both of those written down before you move on.
If the absolute value expression is not isolated, you will need to do that step first. So here, if you look at it, there's a number on the outside of the absolute value bars. So if there's any kind of number on the outside of the absolute value bars, you need to move that first. Here, if the 3 is right next to the absolute value bars, it means that it's being multiplied, so we'll divide by the 3 to get rid of that. So here's number 3. Go ahead and make sure you write that down. 3 absolute value, x plus 7 absolute value equals 24. This 3, or the absolute value bars, do not work like parentheses, so you cannot distribute that 3. Okay, do not distribute the 3. We're going to move the 3 first and then set up our two equations just like we did in the last problem. So here we're going to isolate the absolute value bars or get them by itself. So we're going to move the 3. And again, if it's right beside of it, it's being multiplied, so we're going to divide both sides by 3. We get x plus, or the absolute value of x plus 7 equals 8, because 24 divided by 3 is 8. Once we have the absolute value bars by themselves, we're going to set up our two equations. And it says the absolute value of x plus 7 equals 8 is got to be either negative 8 units from 0 or 8 units from 0. So we're going to split that up into 2. X plus 7 equals negative 8 and x plus 7 equals positive 8. We're going to solve both of these. Here to solve for x, we need to move the plus 7, so we're going to subtract 7. And x equals negative 15. On the right-hand side, we're going to subtract 7, and we get x equals 1. So we have our two answers for x. We have negative 15 and 1. We need to write these as a solution set in set notation, or using our squigglies or braces. We have negative 15 first, because that's our least number, and then our 1. So there's our answer, okay, and we want your answers written in this set notation. Then we're going to check to make sure that these answers are correct. Now, anytime you go to check, you go back to the original problem before you do anything to it, before you move the 3 or anything. So you go back to the original, and instead of x, we're going to plug in negative 15. Negative 15 plus 7 is negative 8. Once I have it down to just one number in the absolute value bars, I'm going to say the absolute value of negative 8 is 8. And then 3 times 8 is 24. So 24 equals 24 checks out. Then I'm going to check my other answer with my 1. So I'm going to say 3 absolute value of 1 plus 7 equals 24. 1 plus 7 is 8. The absolute value of 8 is 8. And 3 times 8 is 24. So it checks out. So these are our two solutions, negative 15 and 1. Again, please make sure you have all of the work written and all of the checks. You do not have to write the number line at the bottom.
Okay, looking at number 4, we're going to look at this one on paper. The problem is the absolute value of x minus 4 equals 2. Again, our absolute value bars are not isolated or alone on this side of the problem, so we're going to have to get them by themselves before we can do anything else. So we have the minus 4 or negative 4, and in order to get rid of that and move it to the other side, we have to add 4. So we're going to add 4 on both sides. It's going to cancel here, and I'm going to bring down my absolute value of x equals 2 plus 4 is 6. So the absolute value of x equals 6. Now I can separate this and set it up into my two separate equations. And very simply, I have x equals negative 6, x equals positive 6. And that's all the work that I have to do there because x is by itself in those absolute value bars. So I have to write my answer in my squigglies or my braces as negative 6, comma 6. Again, I'm writing those from least to greatest, and I'm just doing the best I can on drawing those squigglies. So now we have to check our answer. We come back again to the original problem. So we've moved back this negative 4. It's over here where it belongs in the original problem. And I'm just going to write it with my x plugged in as negative 6 minus 4 equals 2. And then over here, the absolute value of positive 6 minus 4 equals 2. Negative 6, the absolute value of negative 6 is going to be positive 6. So I'm going to have 6 minus 4 equals 2. And over here, the absolute value of positive 6 is going to be positive 6. And I have 6 minus 4 equals 2. 6 minus 4 is 2. 2 equals 2. 6 minus 4 again is 2. 2 equals 2. That checks out. So my answer is negative 6, positive 6. Make sure that you have that copied down before we move on.
All right, not all absolute value equations have two solutions. Most of them do, but not always. If the absolute value of A is positive, then there are two solutions. If the absolute value expression equals 0, then there's only going to be one solution. So if the absolute value of 0, or if the absolute value of A equals 0, there's one solution. If an equation states that an absolute value is negative, there are no solutions. If the absolute value of A equals 0, there are no solutions. Please make sure that you copy the boxes before you move on. Number 5, we have the absolute value of x minus 2 equals 0. The absolute value bars are by themselves here. So if we look on the other side, we have 0. So if we look over here, if the absolute value is positive, there are two answers. If the absolute value equals 0, one solution. And if the absolute value equals a negative number, there are no solutions. So here, the absolute value equals 0. So we are going to have one solution. So I only have to set up one equation from here, because what numbers are 0 units from 0? So I'm going to say x minus 2 equals 0. Okay, and where we split the other one into 2, here we can't really do that because there isn't any such thing as a positive 0 and a negative 0. 0 is just 0, which is the reason that we only have to set this up once. So x minus 2 equals 0, so we're going to add the 2 to both sides, and x equals 2. That is our one solution.
We're still going to write it in our brackets or our squigglies.
Still put it in your set notation, brackets, squigglies, and we're still going to check, but this time we only have one answer to check instead of 2. So we're going to go back to the original, and we're going to say absolute value of 2 minus 2 equals 0, and 2 minus 2 is 0, and the absolute value of 0 is 0. So 0 equals 0, and that checks out. Go ahead again, take a minute, make sure you have the work and the check written down. You do not have to write the number line at the bottom.
All right, let's look at number 6. You have the absolute value of x plus 9 equals negative 2. The absolute value can never equal a negative number. If you ask yourself the question, what numbers are negative 2 units from 0, there is nothing that is negative 2 units from 0 because distance can never be negative. So the absolute value bars over here by themselves can never equal a negative number. So there is no solution. So again, if the absolute value of a equals a negative, there are no possible solutions. Absolute value is always positive. There is no solution. Just make sure that you write down absolute value of x plus 9 equals negative 2 and then write the words no solution.
All right, number 7 says absolute value of x plus 4 plus 7 equals 2. So here, the absolute value bars are not by themselves yet, so we can't tell whether there's going to be 2 solutions, 1 solution, or no solutions. We have to get those absolute value bars by themselves first. So we need to move that plus 7 that's on the outside of the absolute value bars. So we're going to subtract 7 from both sides, and 2 minus 7 is negative 5. Now that the absolute value bars are by themselves, we can look to see what they equal, and here they equal a negative number. So if we look, if the absolute value equals a negative number, we have no solution. But again, I have to make sure to get those absolute value bars by themselves before I know that it's a no solution answer. Go ahead and take a minute. It says how many solutions will each equation have? We don't want you to solve these. We just want to know, is it going to have 0 solutions, 1 solution, or 2 solutions? So again, take a minute, tell us, do you think that each one of these equations have 0 solutions or no solution, 1 solution, or 2 solutions? So go ahead and pause the video and take a minute. All right, let's go ahead and look at each one of these.
Just one more second, a few more seconds.
If we look at this first one, the absolute value bars are already by themselves, and it equals a negative number, so it's going to be no solution. If you look at this one, again, you would have to get the absolute value bars by themselves, so you're going to have to subtract 7 first, and then divide by a negative 3. So when I do that, it's also going to be no solution. With C, I have to get the absolute value bars by themselves. So if I add 5 to both sides, negative 5 plus 5 would equal 0. So it's going to have 1 solution. If I look at D, when I get the absolute value bars by itself, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So 0 plus 3 is 3. So it would be a positive number. So there's going to be 2 solutions to that one. On E, if I subtract 6 from both sides, 6 minus 6 is 0, so the absolute value of x would equal 0. So I would have 1 solution. And here, if I have minus 11 and I add 11, negative 9 plus 11 would give me a positive number, which would mean I would have 2 solutions. Again, if you did not get any of those correct, please make sure that you go back and fix those. So there are our objectives. We should be able to solve equations in one variable that contain absolute value expressions. Go ahead and try this one on your own, just as a little bit more practice. The absolute value of x minus 2 equals 18.
Go ahead and try to get a solution set and check this work. All right, let's check your work here. We have the absolute value of negative 2 equals 18. I'm sorry, excuse me. We have the absolute value of x minus 2 equals 18. Sorry. So I'm going to drop the absolute value bars and set this up as two separate equations. I have x minus 2 equals negative 18, and then I'm going to draw my line to separate them. X minus 2 equals positive 18. So I'm going to solve for x in each one. I'm going to add 2 on both sides to cancel out here, and I have x equals negative 18 plus 2, which gives me negative 16. And over here, I have to add 2 on both sides, which gives me x equals 20. So I have in my squigglies negative 16 and 20. And I'm going to check, going back to the original problem, x minus 2 equals 18. The absolute value of negative 16 minus 2 equals 18. And the absolute value of 20 minus 2 equals 18. Negative 16 minus 2 gives me, negative 18. The absolute value of negative 18 is 18. 18 equals 18. 20 minus 2 gives me 18. And 18 equals 18. So that does check out. This is the end of your video for today. Thank you for watching.